Welcome, everyone, to You're Gonna Need a Bigger Bottle.
Welcome. Ooh, my throat is sore. I might lose my voice by the end of this recording.
Are you still recovering from being sick?
Well, I'm not like sick anymore, but there's all the disgusting,
all the phlegm, all the
residue. Ropey phlegm that's just like irritating, and it's bad. It's bad.
Your sinuses are like the sewers in Ghostbusters 2 right now.
They're filled with mood slime.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, everybody, it's a podcast about movies and wine. And for those of you who don't know shit about one or both, my name is Jamie. I am the wine guy.
He's Jamie. He's the wine guy. I'm Scott. I'm your movie guy. We are here to help you, dear listener. Each episode, we pair a movie that I love with a wine that he loves.
We tell you why we like them, how they're made, and why they work. Hopefully, we find a pairing that works. Usually, we don't. And
we almost never do.
We almost never do. And as has become usual, we're doing something different today.
That's right. So today we are continuing our 4-part miniseries on the Best Picture nominees of the 95th Annual Academy Awards. Last week we discussed my favorite movie of the crop and of all of 2022, that being Todd Field's Tar. And today we're talking 3 big Oscar players that are all about family. Do you see I found a little thematic through line there, Jamie?
I like it.
A little bit of crossover in the subject matter.
Family.
It's about family. Although otherwise they couldn't be any different from one another, these 3 movies. So we're talking James Cameron's Avatar, The Way of Water, Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans, and the Daniels, Everything Everywhere, All at Once. Jamie, what are we drinking to go along with these 3 family-friendly movies?
Well, first of all, correction. I believe it's pronounced The Bagelmans. And second of all...
Wow. Jamie.
Yes?
Once again... Please state your bona fides for why it should maybe be okay for you to repeat anti-Semitism on the podcast.
Everybody knows that I'm a big honkin' Jew, all right?
I do not.
I thought Bagelman in that movie was very funny, and I thought the hanging bagel in his locker was quite funny.
Wow. I didn't think either of those were funny. The hanging bagel was a threat.
Yes.
And calling him Bagelman is not original. Like finding the rhyme, not very funny.
Nope.
And going for, he's a Jew, he must like bagels. Like, I don't know, fuck off Northern California proto-fascist. Like, everybody likes bagels where I come from.
Well, yeah, you come from the Jew-infested northeast of the United States.
Oh, my God. All right, great. So we've got more hate speech on the show. Wonderful.
For the record, I love bagels.
That's the important thing Jamie wanted to get off his chest, is that he likes bagels.
I like bagels, okay?
I also like bagels.
You're right, Scott. Everybody likes bagels.
Everyone likes bagels.
I mean, it's bread. Everybody likes bread. Even if
bread is good.
You're gluten-free and can't have bread, you still like bread.
You still want the bread.
Right. It's like me with cigarettes. I don't smoke anymore. I still want cigarettes.
Man, I was sorely tempted today, I tells you.
Boy.
Tells you.
Yeah, after that description of your day.
Yeah.
We are all the way off the rails already.
Indeed.
This miniseries, we're covering the Best Picture nominees for the 3rd time now. And it's become tradition for us to drink a little bubbly, little carbonated grape juice.
Carbonation station.
That's right. So last week we had the light, sweet, and easy, much like myself, Rovero Bricchetto. And today we're popping corks together on Laurent Barth's 2019 Alsace Petillant Naturel, available at chambersstreetwines.com. That's chambersstwines.com for $24.99 plus tax and shipping.
That is a slightly less reasonable price than last week's wine, but I still think very reasonable.
I'm gonna pop this. I'm gonna pop this bottle.
I'm gonna pop it as well. Although before we really get into the wine, Jamie, I don't know if you noticed, I am not alone today.
Oh God, you have your background blurred, and I wasn't paying attention until you mentioned.
She's here, baby.
Lydia's out here.
Lydia wanted to join me, and she just wanted to, be a threatening, terrifying presence in the background of the video. So that, you would know not to pull any of your shit like last time.
Linda, go fuck back off to the Philippines, okay?
Wow. All right, I'm putting Blur back on again. I don't want people to see my bedroom. Blur. Have you heard from Jonathan James' words recently?
No more than like what we discussed in movie chat.
Oh,
about
just that he was texting me and he's like, wow, he watched Tar, and then the next day he listened to our episode and he texted me, he's like, wow, it's not just that it's the first movie that you and I, Jonathan Words and I, have agreed upon in a long time. And he's like, wow, Jamie couldn't be any more wrong. Like, it's incredible how wrong Jamie is. I told him.
I feel like my stance on this is pretty uncontroversial.
I think we should cancel the record. We should cancel today's discussion topics and spend another hour debating the virtues of Tar the woman and Tar the film.
We're in agreement on Tar the film.
I don't know. All I heard you say was, oh my God, freaking Tar, hashtag woke Jamie, hashtag.
That's true. I hashtag everything that I say.
Including the word hashtag. It was
hashtag spelled out. Yes, correct.
That's right.
Fucking
All right.
asshole.
All right. So I'm gonna open this wine here. I'm gonna pop it. So this is a proper champagne cork in here, right?
It is. Oh
right.
boy. Once that's in the glass, give it a decent swirl.
Oh God.
There is a little
bit
of
chunkus.
There's no chunkus. No chunkus. But there was just like a tiny bit of sulfur that offends my sensibilities. It gives a little stinging sensation in the nostrils.
All right, I'm doing some pouring here. So this is a more conventional. Oh God, I keep hitting things. A more conventional white grape sparkling.
Yes.
This isn't pink and
well, I mean,
super strawberry-ish as last time, I'm assuming.
There are red grapes in this wine.
There are red grapes in this wine.
Yes.
But the skins are removed and not pressed.
It is direct to press, no maceration.
Yeah, there's a sulfury, not hugely sulfurous.
No,
is it a smell or a taste thing?
It's a smell, and it with a quick swirl it goes away. But the first smell for me was like a big kick of it, and now I'm pretty good.
All right.
Ooh.
So this is new to you, right? You have not had this before.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's fucking good.
Interesting. So it's I don't know about that's fucking good. Huh.
It's cidery.
It's cidery. It's there is a bitterness. Not an intense, horrifying bitterness, but there's still. Oh man, I'm really congested sounding.
The bubbles are lovely. Good acid. Texture is like really broad.
I thought you're just saying all the things. You're not even giving me a chance to get my notes in.
I got excited. I like it. You go on ahead.
Well, there's a nice acid. The bubbles are very fine. I forget all the other things you said because I'm annoyed. It is crisp. It's not at all what I expected. That cider note is not my favorite.
See, I get it mostly on the palate, and it's not like hard cider. It's like Martinelli's apple cider. Like fresh, unfermented apple juice.
I got to tell you, I am fairly congested at the moment, and so my apparatus is diminished in its capacity.
But there's also this like a bit of a musty basement aroma on the nose. But it's mostly fruit for me on the palate.
I guess I'm getting like some of the acidity of like a pineapple, but I'm not really getting. It's not really sweet.
No, it's not sweet.
When
I
think of fruit, I normally think of sweet. I know not all the fruit flavors are sweet, but.
Well, I mean, fruit is generally sweet, and so we associate fruit with sweetness. And so if we're tasting a lot of fruit flavors, sometimes we'll, conflate that with sweetness. Or if we're not getting sweetness, we'll kind of ignore it for ignoring the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Yeah. There's like an apple or like a pear thing
I think it's big apple and pear is like the primary fruit component here, and it's like, what's driving the palate experience.
And like one of those crisp, kind of dry apples, not your Honey Crisp, but you know, one of the apples that I don't enjoy as much, whichever those are.
Like a Macintosh apple is
like a Macintosh or like a Red Delicious, something where it's like a little bit too tart,
or a little bit mealy,
perhaps. There's a slate, or maybe not slate, but there's some kind of minerality with this as well. The minerality I like. I'm down with the minerality, but there's that like what you described as like a cider component there, where there's like a sour note to like an apple cider. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of that sourness here, or maybe that's just okay, good. So that's real. That's not me imagining that.
I don't know what I was expecting from this wine, but it wasn't this. And I like how sort of just broad and friendly it is. It's fullish body, for a sparkling wine. It has like a little bit of nuttiness up front. It's got like a hazelnut thing on the nose alongside that minerality, which is really enchanting. And then the fruit comes through on the palate that like almost like a spiced orange, or obviously I said apple cider. I think that tartness comes through as like a lemon juice or lemonade kind of component to it. Apples and pears, big time.
Is there a tannic thing going on? Is it like a little bit? Because I'm getting the dry tongue situation that I get from the more tannic or astringent wines.
Maybe not enough for me to call it tannic, but
there's something,
earlier when I was talking about the texture of it, that's kind of what I meant. It's got almost like a Chenin Blanciness to the texture.
A Chenin Blanciness.
Yes. Chenin has an almost tannic quality that kind of dries out your tongue before the acidity really like punches through and activates your salivary glands. And I get a little bit of that here.
There's a familiar note. Something between the like mild bitterness and that textural Chenin Blanciness. There's something in the bulb, almost like baking chocolate. I know I've said baking chocolate on the show before, but there's a hint of that. I feel like if I could smell right now, I would be getting more of that note. Or maybe something else.
There's like a root kind of thing to it. Like licorice root or angelica root.
Well, I haven't consumed either of those. What do those things taste like?
Well, licorice root, unsurprisingly, has like an anise, like licorice, like flavor to it, but also like a deep, deep earthiness. Angelica is one of the prime components of Angostura bitters. Yeah, I'm really digging this. It makes sense to me why this is like the wine that this winemaker holds back a ton of to like just serve at the winery.
Damn, there's something else and I can't place it. Maybe it's that lingering sulfur. There's like a bit of a funk, a hit of a funk that's actually piercing my congested nostrils right now.
A funk.
Yeah, some kind of like funk element, some kind of low note, like, I don't know.
Like clay or earth? Or like
no, but like with a funk, with like a piercingness, because funk is like low, but then it pierces. At least to me, you know. There's like
barnyardy,
a little bit, and
is
that
it eggy?
No, not eggy. More barnyard, more manure, which I guess kind of ties into that. Like there's like a sour note, that sour thing that comes along with ciders, especially like if you let the cider stay in the fridge a little bit too long and the bottle starts to kind of bulge out with the gas.
Are you saying that you've accidentally fermented some apple cider before?
Yeah, 100% I have. I don't want to throw out apple cider, but once the bottle gets all distorted and distended, like, yeah, all right, it's got to go.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And that's always a sad day.
All right. Well, tell me about this. So first of all, this is extra brut. So brut is when you use the red grapes to make a sparkling. Is that what brut is?
No, that's not what brut is.
It's not remotely what brut is. Is brut about it being dry because it's dry?
Yes.
Brut
Yes.
is dry,
Brut is dry.
sparkling wine.
Yes.
What is sweet sparkling wine?
Doux or Moleux.
Why have I never seen that on a bottle before?
Not a lot of it gets made these days. The general palate for sparkling wine is for dry wines. The one that you may have seen on shelves is demi-sec, which means off-dry. And those wines are more common, but like to see a Doux or a Moleux is pretty uncommon. Brut is in Champagne. It means less than 9 grams per liter dosage, and the dosage is the sugar that you add with a little bit of yeast prior to the secondary fermentation where you get the bubbles. Extra Brut here just refers to, this is a dry wine. It's sort of an unregulated addition to this label.
What? There's an unregulated addition to the label from a bottle from France?
Well, you see at the top of the label here, it says Vin de France.
I do see that.
Or Vin de France.
Right. Or wine of France.
That's right. So that is one of the lower tiers of regulations and also of like quote unquote quality. So you have your Vin de France and then your AOP wines after that. A Vin de France can be any grape that is grown in that area. And inside the Vin de France like labeling language, you can kind of put whatever you want on the label, which is why a lot of winemakers make wines like this. This is where like creativity lives.
Creativity lives outside of the oppressive
AOP system, yes.
AOP regulatory. We have to scrutinize all the punctuation on your label, and you can only make the thing that we say you can make. And if you make the thing that we say you can make, but you make it somewhere else, it's not actually the thing that you said it is.
Well said. That is correct. So Extra Brut here is just telling the consumer that this is a dry wine. And I think it amply does that. I mean, it says Extra Brut and it tastes quite dry.
It's pretty dry. Very dry. There is no sweetness to be found.
Correct. So one of the reasons that this is labeled a Vin de France is that this wine is a Pet Nat, and that's not allowable in the Alsace AOP. There is Cremant d'Alsace, which is the sparkling appellation, but there are a lot of that has to be method champenois, and it has to spend a certain amount of time on its lees before disgorgement, and blah 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 blah, and be of a certain number of the allowable grapes within Alsace, which then brings us to the second reason that this is a Vin de France, which is that this wine is made predominantly from Auxerrois, which is not one of the grapes allowable.
Oak Serrois?
Auxerrois. Auxerrois.
Do you pronounce the X?
Yeah, you pronounce the X. Auxerrois.
I thought it was O, just O. Well, I guess that, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
That's at the end of a word when it's a silent X indicating plurality.
But this is a different thing.
Yeah, this is just an X.
And what does it mean?
What does the word mean? I have no idea.
What does Auxerrois mean?
It means it's a grape. Auxerrois is a grape, just like Chardonnay or like Pinot Blanc or like any. It's a vinifera variety that has been grown for years in Alsace.
And we use the French word for it because of the French primacy and the wine pecking order.
That's correct.
France. All right. Grapes are to. I've been working on this analogy here. Grapes are to all other plants as dinosaurs are to all other animals. Because dinosaurs are basically the only animal that we call by their scientific names. And whereas grapes, conversely, we exclusively refer to by their fucking French names because of the French and their silliness. But other plants, they can translate languages. All right, the analogy is a little bit shaky, but you see what I'm saying. There's an unnecessary exception there. Yeah,
I agree. The analogy is a little shaky. I think a better analogy, and I may or may not have said this on mic before, is that grapes are to all other plants in the same way that domesticated dogs are to all other animals. A Auxerrois, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Blanc, Nebbiolo, etc., ad nauseum, are all the same species of vine. In the same way that a Jack Russell and a Schnauzer and a Golden Retriever and a Labrador and a Polish Water Dog and whatever are all the same species of dog. But we refer to them by their like colloquial names, and we agree upon a series of defining characteristics for each breed.
All right, fine. That's a better analogy.
I like the dinosaur analogy better because dinosaurs are more fun.
Dinosaurs are more fun than dogs, and I love dogs.
I love dogs too. No disparagement to dogs.
No one would ever disparage dogs in this house.
Or in this house. He's looking at Linda.
Lydia might have a thing or two to say about dogs.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Oh God!
Right.
Speaking of dogs, I watched The Lobster for the first time the other day.
Oh yeah, it's a good movie.
Rough on the dog.
Fucking bananas movie. Well, it's not rough on the dog. It's rough on his brother.
Who is the dog?
Yes. Good movie.
Really, really good movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Really good movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first watch through, and it was lovely, if a little bit difficult, especially when we saw the bloody remains of that poor border collie.
I thought you were going to say it was rough to watch when John C. Reilly is forced to put his fucking hand in a toaster as punishment for masturbating.
That also was a little rough. Although
there's something about John C. Reilly screaming in pain that is funny and more painful than other people screaming in pain.
It's an interesting perspective.
It's devastating because it's funny. His voice is just funny.
It's true.
But also it feels like it hurts more. I found that very upsetting. It's not like my favorite movie, but all the John C. Reilly in all of it is just incredible. And Ben Whishaw. The Ben Whishaw is fantastic too.
Ben Whishaw is
he's the other guy of like the trio when they're in the hotel.
Yeah. He's the guy who keeps hitting himself in the face to get a nosebleed.
Right.
Interesting, twisted movie.
Mm-hmm.
Liked it a lot. Not my favorite, but liked it an awful lot.
Is good.
Is good. Anyway, poor dog.
Poor dog.
This has been the lobster tangent.
All of this is getting cut out.
From
the moment I brought up my terrible dinosaur analogy, the last 8 minutes is gone.
The people like this, Scott. They like it when we riff.
This is garbage. I'm pouring more wine. Tell me about Laurent Barth.
Laurent Barth. So Laurent is Laurent. He took over his father's estate in 1999 after some significant travel of the world to learn how to better farm and make wine. His winery is located in the village of Bennevier. You know, Alsace having sort of both roots in France and Germany. A lot of the names are either or some combination of the two. But this town actually has some pretty deep battle scars from having been almost completely destroyed during World War II. Not a good vibe, but
no.
Somehow the winemaking culture survived through all of
I'm sure all the death and destruction and explosion somehow enriched the soil, and that's all you fucking people care about.
I'm sure the people in the area just needed something fermented to drink after all of that bullshit is really what it is. It's a really tiny estate. It's only 4 hectares, which translates to about 10 or 11 acres. So a pretty small area, small production, and notably farming 28 single plots and frequently vinifying them into 10 or more cuvées in each vintage. So this is a person who is a nerd, is a geek, likes to get granular, likes to do a lot.
I don't understand. None of those metrics mean anything to me.
Okay, so
what is a plot?
You have a farm, right?
Yes.
And it's mostly vines, and each plot, essentially, each like little area that you've demarcated as like something interesting and different happens here.
So is a plot an agreed upon metric, like measure of space, or it's just this is where I'm growing this thing?
Right. It's the second thing. It's defined
Okay.
by the owner of the land or the winemaker.
Okay, so a plot could be 10 acres, or a plot could be a garden behind the kitchen. Like it's
Correct.
just the plot is what a distinct thing is planted here.
Yep.
So from 28 different plots, he produces 10 or more cuvées.
Yes.
And the cuvée is the big vessel that makes a thing.
A cuvée is a label. Is
a
like
label.
a distinct SKU, essentially, that gets put on a shelf. Like it's a thing that has its own. It's a single product, essentially.
But a cuvée is not the same as the vintage, because the vintage is the cuvée by year.
Correct.
All right.
I say all of this because I find it interesting when people do this kind of thing. You know, he's got only 4 hectares of land. He could like pour all of his expertise and knowledge into making, 5 or less cuvées, maybe one single vineyard, one bigger blend, a sparkling. But this guy wants to do like a bunch of single plot vinifications, find out which blend together to do a specific thing, or which ones he wants to bottle alone as a single plot or single vineyard wine. It just kind of vibes with my general approach to things, right? Like be curious, find the things that work the best. A giant fermentation, while it's easier to manage, maybe is a lot less interesting than, going through and seeing what happens in the 28 different plots that you are vinifying every year. And seeing how to put them together in interesting ways.
So does each of these plots, like, does he have 10 plots that lead to the 10 cuvées, and then the other 18 are just like him fucking around and seeing what works? Or
no, he probably has like in any given year 3 or 4 plots that lead to 4 of the cuvées, and then the remainder are different blends and different treatments and different ways of combining these things.
Right, okay, because if he's doing blends, then he needs multiple plots to grow the grapes that would go into the blend.
Correct.
All right, we're getting back to basics here. I'm a little rusty, Jamie. All the vocabulary is gone.
I guess I'll have to change my didactic approach, see if there's more stickiness that can be achieved here.
I have been trying to get you to change your didactic approach for 58 and a half episodes, and I've had no success so far. So,
yeah, that's fair. It probably won't happen.
Ooh, I'm getting, there's more of that funk, that the combination of sour and bitter.
For you, is it like like a rotten piece of apple, or is it?
I don't know. I don't eat a lot of rotten fruit. I'm one of those terrible Americans who like throws the fruit out when it starts to look bad. I'm not proud of it. I guess I should compost that shit or something.
Yeah, you should. There's stuff that you can make from it. You can make jam. I'm trying to drill down on like what this funk is, just so that I can understand where you're at. Because for me, this wine is pretty damn clean. There is definitely like a sourness to it, but I attribute that to like more of a lemon juice thing than like a turned cider or anything that's like barnyardy.
I mean, it could just be my sinus situation is throwing things off.
And you also taste is subjective.
And you claim that taste and smell are the same, which they are not.
They are.
They are not.
They're the same thing.
They are received in the different parts of the brain. We have gone over this. You have been proven wrong by a double scientist.
Sure. I refuse to admit defeat.
Yeah, there's more of that unrelenting didactism that we were just talking about. I don't dislike it. It's just not what I expect from a sparkling. I know this is not a champagne, but I don't know, the bitterness and the sourness are not. I mean, I guess we've had, what was it? What did we do with Widows? There was a bit of that like that
Widows
dark
we
chocolate
did.
bitterness with it.
We did La Roche. It was the Chablis or the Bourgogne Blanc.
Yeah.
It wasn't sparkling.
It wasn't sparkling?
No, it was Chardonnay.
Well, if it wasn't Widows, it was something. There was something in the early days that we did a sparkling. In fact, here, I'm just
I mean, we did Parasite. We did the Fabrice Gasnier.
Maybe it was the Fabrice Gasnier then. But where there was the bitterness that I likened to a baking chocolate thing, that's not surprising to me, but it's that paired with the sourness that is just not what I'm expecting from sparkling. Like last time, the sparkling that was super, to my tastes, overly sweet, that made more sense to me than this does. Again, don't dislike it. It's just, it's kind of surprising me.
It could be due to the fact that, we've the sparkling wines that we've done on the show have largely been traditional method, or Charmat method, like the Brichetto we did last week. We've done a Pet Nat before. If you recall our first Oscars episode where we did the very chunkusy
Wait. I was going to see if I could remember it, and I was not going to, so never mind. Good idea. That was mega chunkusy. So this is a Pet Nat.
Yes. So this is...
But no chunkus.
No chunkus. So this is what you would refer to as a disgorged Pet Nat.
Because they disgorged the chunkus out.
Disgorgement is a thing that typically happens in the traditional method, right? You have your still wine that you add dosage to, you cap it with a crown cap, and inside the bottle, secondary fermentation happens, and you get bubbles, and also dead yeast cells, which then need to be disgorged. And so there's a gradual process of turning the bottle over so that all the yeast is in the neck. You pop the crown cap off, disgorging the solids, leaving the clear wine inside, and then you put a traditional champagne cork into that wine.
Yes.
For a Pet Nat, rather than having the extra step of dosing the wine and putting the crown cap on it, it's bottled, still fermenting, which is the Pet Nat method. So there's a single fermentation. That's how you achieve the bubbles. And then rather than just like selling that bottle with the crown cap on it, you do the same slow process of turning it upright, getting all of the chunkus into the neck, and disgorging as though it had been a traditional method wine, and adding a cork like this, the traditional champagne cork, to the wine, then labeling and selling. So did that make sense?
I feel like you said the same thing 2 times, but I also am pretty buzzed at the moment. So I'm going to trust that you described 2 different processes.
I said the end twice, which is the
because
disgorgement.
You put the cork
part.
in. You put, you
disgorge,
right.
But the middle part where you do a second fermentation, that's traditional method.
And you don't do that with your Pet Nats.
Pet Nat is one fermentation. You bottle a still fermenting wine.
But there's no chunkus in here. Pet Nat normally has chunkus.
I just described to you how the chunkus gets removed.
But you said they didn't disgorge this one. Disgorgement is
they do disgorge
of...
this one. They didn't disgorge the Cacique Maravilla.
I'm having trouble focusing right now. I apologize.
Did you take your medication today?
I did. In fact, I took yesterday's medication as well this morning. It was a bit of a morning.
Yeah, you had a time. It's okay.
We had
it
a bit of a day.
Okay. So yeah, that's how you get a clear, chunkus-free Pet Nat, is by applying that traditional method technique to the Pet Nat technique. And I think, you're going to end up with generally less of that yeasty brioche kind of thing that you get from like a champagne method or traditional method wine, more in the way of fruit. And I think that this, I don't know, that may be accounting for the funk that you're experiencing.
And yet, again, owing to my suggestibility with these matters, you say yeasty, and suddenly that articulates. There's a bit of a yeastiness to it, not a lot, but it feels like there's a scotch of it.
Maybe a touch. For me, that's, I don't know, it's kind of akin. It's along the same lines rather as the texture. That sort of like broad on the side of your tongue texture. that this wine has could be spoken of as yeastiness, although for me it's just sort of the way it feels on my tongue, and the flavors are largely fruit, and as you say, some significant minerality.
Yeah.
I think a dusty limestone minerality.
Well, I can't place the limestone of it all.
Because you haven't licked a limestone?
Because I haven't licked limestone. Correct. But I'm
But what
glad
if
you
you
agree. I don't know. I guess I'll go to a fucking quarry or something and find some limestone to lick. I'm doing, what do you call it? The thing where you drink and then like you draw in air through your mouth over
retronasal.
Retronasal.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying it more and detecting more things, doing some retronasal bubbling, but also with my nose as clogged up as it is, I'm worried that every time I do it, I'm just going to like dribble out my mouth or spit all over the keyboard.
That would be free entertainment for me. Man, it's really good. I really like this.
Yeah, the acidity's coming out more. That bitterness is feeling more like underripe pear or apple. Yeah, again, don't dislike it. I'm just kind of confounded by it. It's one of those that like I don't know. It's like how you were describing Tar before, that like you last time that you would not want to rewatch Tar because it's not enjoyable, and the things that you want to rewatch are the things that are fun. And I don't find this wine fun at all, but I do find it compelling and kind of complexing.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about buying more bottles of this just for my house because I really like it.
Shocking. Unprecedented moment. Jamie is considering buying more wine. How many bottles you got in the cellar right now?
I have not counted lately.
Yes, you have.
I have not.
Every night before bed, you go downstairs and you count all of your bottles.
There was a like significant pandemic depletion of the old cellar, and we're getting back up to levels here.
To fighting weight.
Yep. And I just took my Bedrock, Turley, and Sandlands allocations. And when those arrive by April, yeah, we'll be. I might need a new rack.
But what does that mean numbers wise?
If I have all of my racks filled, it's like 480 bottles.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah,
you gonna drink all those wines
at some point?
Okay, reasonable. You have more wines on hand right now than I have DVDs and Blu-rays, and also 4Ks.
That makes sense.
I've got about 430, although I don't trust that my list is 100% accurate. I keep finding things that I forgot to add to it.
Gonna have to do an inventory.
Oh shit, I've got the whole Jacques Tati box set that I need to add to it.
Which is how many movies?
8, I think. I had to buy the Tati box set so that for my birthday we could watch Playtime at a theater.
That was so delightful.
That was grand.
It was really
Playtime.
Good. Playtime's good. If you're out there and you didn't listen to our episode on Playtime because you hadn't seen it, this is your reminder to go watch it and then maybe listen to the episode, but like watch the movie.
And now that you've seen it a second time in a theater, in a real movie theater, you've seen the full Playtime experience.
Yeah, it was great. It's like when you mentioned on the episode that there were no close-up shots, it was all medium and wide. It really didn't click for me because like I just don't think of movies in the same way that you do.
Yeah.
But in the theater, that was all I could see. And partly probably because you brought it to my attention, but also just because it's so huge and it takes time to focus on something in the top right corner when I've been focusing on something in the bottom left.
Yeah. It's a gift. It just every time you watch it, you can watch different stories. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's a lovely little transition there because the first movie we're going to talk about today is a film that I think if you haven't seen it theatrically and with a bunch of asterisks at the end of that, you haven't actually seen the movie. So should we move on?
Well, I wanted to talk about malolactic fermentation, but I think we should move on.
How many times have we talked about malolactic fermentation?
I don't know. A lot, Scott. Can you tell me what it is?
No, but it's the thing that gives it like a milky, buttery, smooth quality.
Okay.
Malolactic is the thing that gives it the buttery, smooth mouth feel.
All right.
That is common in Chardonnay.
I will accept that as an answer, and we can move on.
But also, it's not a fermentation. It's a process. It's another thing. Hang on. Malolactic.
He's going to get it.
No,
it's in there.
I'm not.
If it's not carried out by yeast, what's it carried out by, Scott?
Sugar.
No.
Wine. Alcohol. Sulfur.
Bacteria. It is a bacterial conversion.
Malolactic conversion. That was the word. All right. Briefly say the thing you wanted to say about malolactic conversion. It's a process.
It's a process, and it's often a choice for winemakers, and it can be a stylistic choice. And I find it to be interesting that this particular winemaker has a very laissez-faire outlook on malolactic fermentation. He allows his ferments to sort of do what they will, and if they start mallow, he's not going to block it, but he doesn't specifically seek it out. And I don't have any information on whether this wine went through mallow, although by taste, my guess is no.
And how would he block it? Is this an additive thing? Does he add alcohol or sulfur? You can block
either by sulfur or by temperature control.
But you said there was a sulfury note here. So is that not evidence of the blockage of mallow?
No. I think that there's just a little bit of sulfur added at bottling. Just to keep
arrest the fermentation.
To stop any nonsense from going on in the bottle before you buy it.
But is that Pet Nat? Because Pet Nat is au naturel. You can't add sulfur and still be Pet Nat.
No, that Pet Nat is like sometimes a signifier of natural wine, but is not necessarily natural wine itself.
But the nat in Pet Nat indicates
naturel. It's natural bubbles, meaning it's just the term, man. I don't know what to tell you.
But the terms have to mean things. I guess it doesn't matter because this one is just vin de France, which is not allowed because it's okay because it's a lesser wine or something. Goddamn hoity-toity French wine law-making bastards.
I echo your frustration with label terms. It's fucking frustrating.
I'm just mad at the French because I watched Battle of Algiers last night.
And also, the French are bad. We can all agree that the French are bad.
All right. Well, here goes Jamie again. First, he's being anti-Semitic, and now he's fucking anti-France.
I saw, was it a tweet or a TikTok? It was a tweet. It was the AP style guide.
Where you're not allowed to say the French anymore.
Well, it was like you're not allowed. They disparage the use or they encourage the use of person-first communication, like a person experiencing homelessness,
instead
not
of a homeless person, right?
Or a person experiencing Frenchness
instead of a French person, or
which is the best. That's the best one.
But then the thing about the tweet is that they had to reply to it and say that our description, or maybe it was a different tweet where they had to reply to it and say, as an addendum or as a correction, this does not follow with our new style guidelines because we referred to someone as the French, I don't know, politician or something. I don't know. I'm on board with that. Like, while it's hard for my geriatric millennial sensibility to not use words like a homeless person, and I'm on board with changing that description so that we're not just, it's not reductive, right? It's not essentialist.
Right.
I feel like just saying that someone is a French author or a French winemaker is not, I feel like that's okay.
The French
I feel like
one was a joke, man. They snuck it in there.
Are you sure?
I am certain.
I don't know.
100% certain it was a funny joke to disparage French people. To equate Frenchness with something that might be described as negative.
Ah, yes. The AP, known for its sense of humor.
So the person in charge of the account that day snuck one in.
All right. Well, we'll have to table that.
I would be down with just considering French to be a derogatory word moving forward.
I would as well, because all this bullshit about what wines are allowed to be grown is annoying.
I agree.
Yes.
Wait until we start talking about German wine law.
Oh, wonderful. We'll have to talk about that next week when we talk about fucking All Quiet on the Western Front. All right. So anyway,
Avatar TWOW.
The Way of Water.
Yes.
Avatar, The Way of Water. Now, we have previously discussed this movie, so we don't need to talk about it too much.
Best Picture nominee.
Best
Avatar
Picture
TWOW.
nominee. It is Jimmy Cameron's long-awaited sequel. Long-awaited depending on who you ask. And if you ask a person on the internet who holds the brilliant and brazenly iconoclastic opinion that Avatar has no cultural footprint. But it's the sequel to Avatar, the 2009 highest-grossing movie of all time. Avatar: The Way of Water is now the fourth highest-grossing movie at the global box office of all time, making James Cameron the only person ever, and probably will remain ever, to have 3 of the 4 highest-grossing films of all time. Bananas.
Yep.
Anyway, The Way of Water picks up, I don't know, I'm assuming a lot of people have seen this. It's made like $2 billion, but The Way of Water picks up some 15 years or so later as the Sky People, aka us, the humans, return once again to devastate the ecological beauty of Pandora and any of the blue indigenous Na'vi who happen to get in their way. Our heroes from the first film, Jake and Neytiri, played once again by Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana, find themselves and their children being hunted by the villainous Colonel Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang again, who died in the first film and is now resurrected in an Avatar body. The Sullys leave their home to take refuge with the island-living, water-loving Metkayina clan, where they just chill out, learn to free dive, make friends with like sentient marine mammals or maybe reptiles, and basically have a chill time, and nothing bad ever happens to anyone ever again. The movie also stars Sigourney Weaver, Kate Winslet, Cliff Curtis, Edie Falco, and Jermaine Clement. In addition to a nomination for Best Picture, Avatar is nominated for
That was so sweaty.
It was pretty. Well, nobody can tell, but I put Avatar, but then the A has the accent like tar.
Like tar, because you're obsessed with Linda.
Jamie, honest to Christ, if the trailer for Ava 3 came out tomorrow and Kate Blanchett was in it, clearly playing Lydia Tarr, tell me that your ticket wouldn't be pre-sold.
My ticket's already pre-sold, man. I like this movie. I like
it too. It's fun. But anyway, Avatar: The Way of Water is nominated for its sound, its production design, its visual effects, which it will definitely win, and of course, Best Picture. It is currently in all the theaters everywhere, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend that you do that, and go watch it on the biggest IMAXist 3D high frame rateist screening that you can, because I would argue that any other way you haven't really seen the movie.
You haven't really seen the movie.
You haven't really
seen it in this way.
Yes.
My name is Scott, and I'm a snob.
Yes, Jamie, I'm a snob because I'm advocating people see Avatar in 3D IMAX. What a fucking snob I am. You got to go see the biggest movie of the year in 3D IMAX. Oh, what a fucking pretentious ass I must be.
So we're in total agreement.
Yes, sure. 100%. So anyway, in a previous episode, in our Christmas time episode, we already talked about Avatar, and we talked about its dicey politics. And as our friend behind me, Lydia Tarr, would note, that because Jamie's soul is born on social media, we had to talk about the movie's extremely dicey, like racial politics in particular.
They're not great.
They're not great, though I think, once again, that the film's heart is in the right place, even though maybe, James Cameron, white asshole Canadian, probably isn't the person to tell this story about the indigenous people fighting back against the Americans, essentially. But I still think its heart is in the right place.
I agree.
But since we already talked about all of that, I personally wouldn't mind just talking about the different formats and the experience and all the crazy shit that's happening in the movie. Because I genuinely feel that if you don't see it big and 3D and high frame rate, depending on whether or not you can truck with that, then you actually haven't seen the movie.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I agree that it's the best way to do it. But to assert that you haven't seen the movie, it seems a little silly. It seems a little bit much, my friend.
All right. Well, let me give you a analogy in a different medium, a different visual medium. Okay. So recently, I took the child to the Art Museum of Philadelphia. Okay. Give him a little bit of culture that's not moving 24 frames a second, or occasionally 48 frames a second in the case of Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yes.
And we spent most of our time in the Impressionist wing. And there was this one painting that like shook me, and it was Cézanne's Mont Saint-Victoire, which
I'm
is
looking
this
at
like
it right now.
gorgeous landscape with like maybe like some farm plots or some small villages, but like you can see the brush strokes in it, and the color and the light is exquisite, and it's this massive canvas. And in the like little, what are they, the little placard on the wall next to it, they were saying that, you know, Cézanne is like kind of breaking the form in a little bit by using flat planes instead of perspective to create this illusion of perspective. And I was completely arrested by the image. And then when we were in the gift shop later on, and the child was picking out a fucking like plastic knight on a horse toy because they had like the gallery of medieval armors, and that's what he was most excited about. I wanted to get him like an art book or something, but the gift shop was way ahead of me there. But so I was looking through, and I wanted to find a print of this painting. And I find the print and immediately knew that I didn't want to purchase it because it just isn't the same. And it wasn't just the scale or the quality of the printing. It's that it wasn't the same experience of looking at the real thing. Like part of it is scale, and part of it is light, and part of it is how a high-res photograph of the painting can't capture what it's actually like to be in the room with the thing and see the texture of it. But like, it just wasn't the same experience at all. And that is what I'm talking about with Avatar. An equal piece of art of similarly monumental importance to the Western canon.
Well, that comment aside, I have
the canvas.
Some comments.
If you don't see it on the intended canvas, you are not actually experiencing the thing.
And I think that I'm now doing the thing that you sometimes do to me, which is getting hung up on the words that you're using.
Right.
Like, I understand your intent here. It is, and I agree, fundamentally not the same thing to watch Avatar on a 51-inch screen at home than it is to go and see it in the 3Dist, IMAXist, high frame rateist theater that you can.
Great. Period. Cut. Moving on to the next film.
Also,
Jamie agrees.
But I would like to doff my cap a little bit to the wording, because I think that it can be off-putting and not like, I don't know. I just don't like the way it sounds to say like you haven't seen the movie if you haven't seen it this way. Because you have seen the fucking movie. Like, in the same way that I have seen this piece of art, this Mount Saint Victoire, you would have seen the movie had you watched it on a 51-inch or a 20-inch, whatever. You were able to engage in the characters, the story, the pacing, the whatever, just not the scale. You're missing out on one part of the thing, not the thing itself.
It's multiple parts of the thing. And I think it's interesting that the things that you referenced, the things that someone has seen, the narrative, the pacing, and the scale, are all the more literary qualities of a movie. And a movie has more than just its literary narrative qualities.
Sure.
It has its aesthetic qualities. And when you watch it at home on a TV, and I'm not even just talking about on a TV, I'm saying if you see this movie and you don't see it at a gigantic IMAX scale in 3D, that you are not seeing the film as it is intended to be shown to you.
Well, first of all, authorial intent is bullshit. And you can engage with a piece of art how you engage with a piece of art. Like, if I want to pour this wine into a shot glass and experience it that way, that's a valid way for me to experience it. Do I, as a wine professional, think that it's the best way, or the way that you're going to be able to get the fullest experience, or the way that the winemaker wants you to drink it? No.
All right, fine, Jamie. Let me amend my previous statement. If you have not seen Avatar: The Way of Water in a gigantic IMAX 3D presentation, then you have not seen the movie in its optimal presentation.
There you go.
You have not experienced the full sensory like bouquet that the movie has to offer you.
There you go.
And I have seen it in like a proper IMAX, like a for real IMAX. So did you. We went and saw it together.
Mm-hmm.
And then separately, we also saw it in a Limax, which is what your Regals and your AMCs will call their standard size auditoriums that with IMAX's licensing and branding and involvement, they have upgraded to a premium large format presentation. The screen is not only not even comparable in terms of size, but it's not even the same aspect ratio. So the movie is being presented in a different way. And a lot of Avatar's power comes from that sense of scale. And it's not just scale, it's immersion. Like when you see it in, like we went to the King of Prussia IMAX to see it on, I guess, opening day or the day after opening day. That screen is like a third again as tall. Not even talking about height in a metric, but like the aspect ratio of the screen is a third again as tall as a Limax screen, like the one where you saw it at the ye ol' Regal 22 in Warrington.
Mm-hmm.
So like there is more image, but also the screen is so much taller in terms of its scale that you have no peripheral vision essentially. Like it's a curved screen, there's a little bit of a wraparound effect, and it is so high and so encompassing in your vision that with the addition of truly next level 3D and the high frame rate, which we can talk about in a second, the way I describe it is that it's less like looking at a screen than it is like looking into a window. And it's like a window opens up and the movie is just this reality that's playing out in front of you. And this ties into the legacy of the first Avatar and all of these conversations about, which is just happening fucking all the time in media discourse, about does Avatar have any cultural footprint and does anybody remember Avatar? And like, as though the lack of Avatar memes and fucking GIFs and shit is a thing that indicates whether people remember it or care about it or want to come back and see it again. To reduce Avatar simply to a narrative experience and just to the narrative points completely discards the emotional and visceral experience that you have with something that is that transporting, but it's only that transporting when you see it at that scale and in 3D. And for my money, although some will argue with this and I don't dispute them, in the high frame rate. Because it feels like you're there. It feels like you're there and the emotional beats hit harder because it's happening to you. And you're in this place and you're with these people and their experiences. And it's completely transportive in a real gigantic IMAX screen. And it is much less so in a Limax screen. And I would imagine even less so in a standard size cinema auditorium. And even less so without a 3D component. And if you're just watching it on TV, like it might be pretty, but it's not immersive. It's not transportive. And you're left with just the narrative elements, which admittedly are a little bit lacking. But like by design, the narrative is stripped down and the characterization is kind of threadbare just to give you enough to emotionally latch onto so that they can give you a show. They can give you a ride and an experience, and they deliver on all of that. But if you only check the movie out in a 2D, like, you know, not enormous screen, or if you only like wait to watch it on fucking Blu-ray or heaven forbid Disney Plus with their abhorrent HDR and compression, like, no, I don't think you've seen the movie. It's like looking at a painting, but you're only seeing it on your on your computer monitor, or drinking a glass of wine, but you're drinking it out of a fucking sippy cup and denying yourself the scent of it and changing the way that the thing flows into your senses.
Yes. All of what you're saying resonates with me. I think that, you know, I rewatched the first Avatar in between my two viewings of Avatar TWOW.
Yeah.
And
it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's
and
fine.
I had a good time watching it, and I like folded laundry while I did it. And like, you know,
right.
It was fine. I had a decent time. It played on the memories of having seen it in a big theater.
Yes.
And I recalled those emotions and all of that. I as someone in an industry that frequently and very deservedly gets called out for being exclusionary and pretentious and all of that type of thing. The language surrounding "you haven't seen this movie if you haven't seen it this way" is exclusive. It is off-putting, and I don't think it is helpful. Like, one of the big reasons why I prefer AP glasses, and I recommend AP glasses to everyone in my friend group and everyone that I've ever known, and stock them in restaurants that I work in, isn't necessarily because I think it's the best way to express a particular wine. It's that I don't want to waste the time bothering to find the perfect glass for the perfect wine when I know that most people aren't going to engage at the like top level and like really in a meaningful way notice the difference between this AP glass and maybe the Jancis Robinson sparkling glass that perhaps is the best one for this wine. Similarly, my 3D IMAX experience, or my 3D Limax experience, wasn't really an issue for me. I can recognize the things that you say that were lacking from my full IMAX experience, but I saw them both, and honestly, if it hadn't been pointed out by you, I probably wouldn't have made note of it. And I'm not like the least savvy viewer. I'm not the most savvy either. I just wonder what the value is in saying you haven't seen this movie if you haven't seen it in this format. To me, it sounds in the same way that when wine people say you have to have the perfect Burgundy glass to experience this Gevrey Chambertin 2017 or whatever. It just sounds like you're smelling your own farts.
Well, I'm not smelling my own farts, Jamie. All right. I didn't go to a 4DX screening where you can smell the sea air and smell fucking, oh no, I had a thing that I was going to do. Hang on. It's not too late now. I just realized I was about to mention our boy Payakon.
We got Payakon in the background.
Payakon and Loak. They're up in here.
Payakon's the fucking best.
Payakon rules. Cameron has said that Loak will be the one to narrate, to do the like opening and closing narration of Avatar 3. And I'm hoping that Payakon, with his papyrus subtitling, gets to do the narration for Avatars 4 and 5.
With like a fade-in shot of his eye, just so that we know that it's him.
His two eyes, Jamie. His two eyes. One of my favorite, his four eyes, yeah. It's one of my favorite touches in the movie because when we switch to Payakon, the sentient space whale, when we switch to his point of view and we can see through his yellow eye, we see him looking at Loak, and my immediate thought was, this shot shouldn't be in 3D because this is a point of view and he's got only one eye on the side of his head. But then you cut back to the side of his head and he's got an extra little eye that from a design point of view must only be there.
To justify the 3D?
To justify him having stereoscopic vision out of one side of his head.
That is so nerdy, and I love it.
1,000,000%. But yes, I am smelling my own farts, or I'm smelling James Cameron's farts, which probably smell terrible because he's full on vegan, and I'm sure all that fucking bean curd and whatever is really foul and messing up his digestion. But yeah, I didn't say you haven't seen it if you saw it in Limax. I said you haven't seen it if you haven't seen it in the biggest IMAXist, 3Dist screening that you can.
Sure.
That one can. So just seek it out large in 3D. And I know that it's an extra couple of bucks.
There's a way to advocate.
I know that's exclusive. I know that's exclusive, but also like, I don't know. And anyone arguing that like cinema presentation, like in theaters is exclusive, it's only just been the most accessible and open to the public medium, like in the history of media since fucking storytelling around a fire.
Right,
Like-
and that has changed now with the and is likely to change again, I guess, with the adoption of streaming services and people like getting it plugged in directly to their fucking eyeballs. And I understand all of the negatives around that. What I'm saying is that there is a way to advocate for the best presentation without saying you haven't seen this movie. Without laying the blame, the onus, the fault at the feet of the viewer.
I'm not laying anything at the feet of the viewer. I'm just saying seek it out large, and you're being semantic and picking my words apart, and I've never done that to you on this show, and I don't appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'll never do it again, and neither will you.
That's right. So anyway, Avatar: The Way of Water
Is really good in
4
IMAX,
Academy
3D,
Awards
and high frame rate.
It's bananas. Yeah.
Did you want to talk about the high frame rate?
Yeah. So the weird thing about high frame rate is the weird thing about 3D, which is that like I've heard this is my first high frame rate movie. I skipped seeing the Hobbit movies in high frame rate. In fact, after the first one, I just skipped seeing the Hobbit movies, period. And
Same.
most of the other like big high frame rate experiments either were not screened widely enough for me to check them out, or were just movies that like the last big one was probably the Ang Lee film, Gemini Man, where Will Smith, the international assassin, gets hunted by a young clone of Will Smith. And that was 3D high frame rate. And, but it only played in like proper high frame rate in like a handful of theaters in the country. And it was also like when I was deep in like running theaters and trying to open a new theater. And it was just like, I missed it. I have heard that this is one of the most successful high frame rate releases in terms of it like transcending the barrier of high frame rate where it just looks like news footage or sporting events or a soap opera is like the big blight against high frame rate normally. I will say the high frame rate was occasionally a distraction. I found it more of a distraction when, especially in like that last hour, which is just this wall-to-wall gigantic battle sequence, which is mostly in high frame rate. But I found it a distraction whenever they like downshifted from 48 frames down to 28 frames or 24 frames, where it felt like almost the projector was like juddering or struggling to keep up. And it only occurred to me afterward that it was my brain was trying to transition back down to a slower frame rate because your brain has to do just a little bit more work to create persistence of vision. But the problem with high frame rate is the same problem with 3D, which is that not everybody's eyes and brains work the same way. So like the reason that 3D is never going to take off, at least with glasses and the current version of 3D, is that everybody's eyes are a different shape and not your right eye is not the same as your left eye and your brain doesn't perceive it the same way. And so there are some people who are always going to get headaches from 3D. And there are some people who are always going to hate the high frame rate. And that it is a distraction for them. And I can't blame them. Like, and you can't disabuse somebody of that notion. Like, it is their sensory experience of the world.
Yeah.
So like, I would recommend seeing it 3D and high frame rate, but like our dear friend Jonathan Words hated the high frame rate and it took him out of the movie every single time. It's interesting. I think it's all fascinating. And I guess I'm just glad and lucky that my eyes and brain receive these things with open arms and don't find them, so distancing.
Yeah, same. I really enjoyed the high frame rate. I felt it to be a little bit jarring in the beginning when they were upshifting and downshifting.
Yeah. Well, they're teaching you how to watch it.
And that's the
they're
thing.
Like
I thought
slowly trickling it in.
I thought that technique was effective because by the time we got to the last hour, I was in it. I didn't really feel any issues.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed the high frame rate look. It looked good.
I don't want it for everything, but like the thing about high frame rate is that it makes the 3D better. And I'm a junkie for 3D. When it's good 3D, and like I've seen maybe a dozen 3D movies that I would actually like love to see again in 3D, and then most of them have just been like post-converted nonsense just to, get an extra $6 on your ticket price.
Mm-hmm.
But like I love great 3D, and the high frame rate makes the 3D better and more immersive. And you combine that with a monstrous IMAX screen that like completely fills my peripheral vision, and I'm like a pig in shit, man. I was so happy. I loved it.
So did I.
But it's not for everyone.
Can we move on to Everything Everywhere All at Once?
We can. This is another movie that we've briefly talked about on the show. Very
Because it
briefly.
rules,
Well,
we
because
both
it
saw
rules and because we took like a bye week essentially. And so we re-released our Swiss Army Man episode and briefly did a little wraparound segment talking about Everything Everywhere. But yeah, let's move it on. Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't heard of this movie, what rock/interdimensional family member have you been living under? That joke only works if you've seen the movie and know about the parts where the people are rocks. Speaking of,
where they're talking to each other.
I'm like
it's
a
the
total.
best.
I'm ready to go here. Here they
Wow,
are.
there's the shot.
There's the rocks. There they are.
The rocks are largely behind you.
Right. It's the second feature from the writing-directing duo known as the Daniels, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. One of them is only a Dan. I think it's Scheinert. I think it's Daniel Kwan and Dan Scheinert.
Really?
That doesn't matter. Yes.
But they call themselves the Daniels.
The Daniels, yes. But yeah, it's their second feature. It's big and it's weird and it's hilarious and it's heartfelt and it's hyperkinetic and it's unlike anything else you've really ever seen. Michelle Yeoh plays Evelyn, a Chinese-American immigrant business owner facing multiple crises all at once in a single day. Her marriage to Waymond, played by Ke-Huy Quan, is falling apart. Her business is threatened by a mercurial IRS auditor, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, and she is struggling to accept that her daughter Joy, played by Stephanie Hsu, is gay, and also that Joy is a multidimensional being of unlimited power who wants to destroy the entire multiverse. And it's probably Evelyn's fault. Everything Everywhere All at Once, a movie that features like a young woman fighting cops with fucking dildos, is somehow the big dog at the Oscars this year. It has 11 nominations. It is, in addition to Best Picture, it's nominated Best Director for The Daniels, Best Original Screenplay for The Daniels. Michelle Yeoh is nominated for Best Actress. Stephanie Hsu and Jamie Lee Curtis are both nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Wow.
Ke-Huy Quan is nominated for Supporting Actor. He is almost certainly going to win. It's nominated for its costume design, its film editing, its original score by Son Lux, and its original song, This Is a Life. And I just like want to stress that, like, to me, it's completely fucking crazy that this movie is not just nominated for Best Picture, but that it's the most nominated movie of the year, and that it is a presumptive frontrunner for several major categories, including Best Picture, Best Actress, and Supporting Actor.
Yeah, this movie very much feels like a movie that you would recommend to me and that the two of us would scream about nonstop for a year.
Right.
And that basically nobody else would see other than our immediate friend group.
It would be a cult hit, and it is not the type of thing that ever gets nominated for Oscars, except that in the last couple of years, the Academy, especially after the controversy a few years ago of like Oscars so white, the Academy has made genuine efforts to broaden the voting base and the membership. And that broadening is both a diversification in terms of gender and race, but also in age.
Right.
And this is the evidence. Like this is one of the results. I'm not saying that this movie is going to like sweep and win all the awards, but it's crazy that this movie is nominated for Best Picture.
I'm so happy about it because I love it.
It's great. It's so great.
Fucking rules. It's everything that I want from a movie all at once.
That was good. That was a little tie in there. That was wonderful. Yeah.
You're very welcome for that. But seriously, like I constantly am complaining that there is not whimsy or humor or lightness in movies, and there is so much to be found here. There's also like genuine family drama and kick-ass action and like deep, deep existential beats. And I can't think of a thing that I want from a movie that this doesn't do.
I mean, it doesn't have a sentient space whale.
Sure.
Other than that, it does hit
specific.
most of the beats.
Yeah. You know what it doesn't do that I love? It doesn't have an absurd clockwork take on time travel that takes the entirety of the movie to explain.
Yeah, I mean they explained the interdimensional travel pretty breathlessly, pretty quickly. You put on the weird early aughts over the ear cup headphone things, and you do something that is wildly unpredictable, and then somehow you will transition to another dimension and gain the powers of that version of yourself. And then we move on. Like that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, and all of that is explained like in dialogue through a series of action sequences as well.
It's so awesome. It's just so awesome. That scene where she's being taught it, like in the closet. What was it? Take off your shoe and walk backwards or some shit like that.
There's so many. There's that. There's when he eats the chapstick to become like a martial arts master, and then he fights with a fucking fanny pack. There's all kinds of insane banana shit that they try just to get different multiversal abilities. I'm a huge fan of this movie. Obviously, you're a huge fan of this movie. Just never thought as recently as a year ago, because this movie came out in March. So like we've been talking about this movie for 11 months at this point.
Yep.
But like as recently as a year ago, never thought that the follow-up feature from the guys who made Swiss Army Man, the movie with fucking Harry Potter's farting corpse and his boner that's a divining rod, like never thought that those guys would.
Not a
it was a
divining
compass.
rod.
I'm sorry. My mistake. Very important distinction. Like never thought that would be. And like the thing is that like there was immediately this backlash to it getting all the nominations, and that somehow this movie is the front runner and is the popular choice. And there's this backlash to it in the same way you would have a backlash to like, I don't know, a period piece biopic starring Benedict Cumberbatch and like fucking like Kate Winslet, you know, like or like a costume drama that gets all the nominations because it's a historical, or the movie about the making of the movies because Hollywood and the Oscars love to reward stories about Hollywood. Like there was this crazy backlash, and it is so easy to forget that this is the most insane Best Picture nominee maybe in the history of Best Picture nominees. Like it's bananas. It's not what they ever go for. And it's like, look, I'm not saying that the Oscars should be like this bellwether of the culture, or this like that they're nominating like validates things, but it is just shocking. It is this major change in that particular institution that this movie can have 11 goddamn Academy Award nominations.
And we love to see it.
It's bananas.
Partly because we love this movie.
It's got 4 acting nominations. Like movies like this never get nominations. Like genre movies almost never get nominated for performances.
Except these performances, Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, but you're right. There are. You could name a number of genre performances that are of this caliber that did not get nominated.
Sure, of course. We'll talk about it not next week, but because we're bi-weekly, but in the next episode, we're going to talk about the snubs. And there are a bunch of like genre snubs and conversations about genre snubs that are happening right now.
But Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie, she rules.
You know what? That was the surprise one to me, because Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan and Stephanie Hsu, those were all, they seemed like kind of a given that they were going to get nominated just based on the precursor awards and the discussion and the critics groups and everything. I was a little surprised by Jamie Lee Curtis. But it's great. I love it. It's a great villain performance. And then she gets to play like several versions of the same character, and it's wonderful.
And then they have hot dog fingers.
And then they have wonderful, wonderful hot dog fingers, and they have romantic hot dog finger sex.
Where are your hot dog fingers right now, Scott?
They are in the theater right now. They are over in my home theater in a place of honor.
Good.
Behind the child's piggy bank where he puts his quarters every time we decide to pretend play theater and he has to like buy a fake ticket.
That's adorable.
We don't do that as much now that we like actually go back to theaters and stuff. But, you know, when people come over, he likes to show it off, and he likes to buy tickets for everyone, and he has to give them to the box officer, who is a piggy bank.
The box officer is a piggy bank.
Yeah, well, that's where the money goes.
That's adorable.
But anyway, the hot dog fingers are right behind the piggy bank right now.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, they're lovely. I don't ever want to take them out of the box. The box is half the fun.
It's true. The box is perfect. So
With,
for
like, the
anyone who's
nutritional value
wondering,
and
I bought Scott hot dog fingers for Christmas / his birthday.
officially licensed from the A24 store, hot dog fingers.
And it was the second release because I didn't click fast enough on the first release. They had sold out, so I set up an alert for the second release.
That is more thought than I put into your gifts, my friend. If I wanted to get you something and it's sold out, oh well, it's gone forever now.
Nope, hot dog fingers had to happen.
Hot dog fingers. But yeah, the packaging looks like it's
Like
meant
Oscar
to
Mayer
emulate
wieners.
like Oscar Mayer wiener packaging, and it's got nutritional facts, and all the nutritional values are 0 on the side. But yeah, it's lovely. Of the things that I own from the A24 merch store, it's easily the best of them. Big fan of hot dog fingers. Big fan of everything, everywhere, all at once.
But yeah, this movie is going to be on my like once a year watch list for a while. I feel like it's joyful. It's so much fun. And as I said, it does all the things that I personally want from movies.
As of this recording, you can stream it on the Showtime streaming service, or you can purchase it digitally or on my precious physical media. And I have a funsies little 4K copy of it where the cardboard slip sleeve is all googly eyes.
Oh my God, yes.
Which is awesome. So from everything, everywhere, all at once, we must talk about
The Fabelmans.
Signor Spielbergo's The FABELMANS. It's The Fabelmans. It's Steven Spielberg telling his origin story. It's a coming-of-age story about young Sammy Fabelman, played by Matteo Zorian Francis DeFord. That is a hell of a name. In the early sections of the film, and then for the majority of the movie, when he's aged up, Sammy Fabelman is played by Gabriel LaBelle. And it's Sammy's growing love / obsession with filmmaking. And it's about this terrible family secret that he discovers with his camera. Paul Dano and Michelle Williams play Sammy's parents, Bert and Mitzi. Judd Hirsch makes a memorable appearance as Uncle Boris. The great Jeannie Berlin plays Sammy's grandmother. And in one of the most talked about scenes of the year, David Lynch, spoilers, closes out the movie with a cameo as Hollywood legend John Ford. The Fabelmans is nominated for 7 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, credited to Spielberg and his longtime collaborator Tony Kushner. Best Actress Michelle Williams, Best Supporting Actor Judd Hirsch for its production design and its original score, which marks the 53rd Oscar nomination for John Williams.
John motherfucking Williams.
53rd Academy Award nomination.
How many wins?
I think like 8 or 12. 53rd nomination. He's been scoring movies since the late 60s, which means he has been nominated in more years than he has not been nominated in. He's been nominated in many more years than he has not been nominated in.
Set aside the nominations, that is a stunning, enormous body of work.
Yeah.
That just the massive creative output. I can barely write a 2-page article for a second-rate wine publication twice a year. This motherfucker is out here scoring entire movies.
He's scoring entire generations. So God bless you, Johnny Williams. God bless your very restrained score on The Fabelmans, which I don't think any original music shows up until like 45 minutes or an hour into the movie. It's very held back. He waits, like he only scores when he needs to. As of this recording, at any rate, The Fabelmans is back in theaters and is available to purchase wherever you get your VODs, though I do suspect that by the time the episode actually drops, it'll be back out of theaters and you'll be able to rent it on the digital platforms as well. Jamie, I have mixed thoughts about The Fabelmans, but I would like to know what you think. And please keep your self-loathing anti-Semitism to a minimum, because it's not funny.
It's a little bit funny.
It's not funny.
It's a little bit funny.
All right.
Anyway,
on paper, it could be funny. but so far none of your jokes have been funny.
Rude. Very rude. Well, first of all, I do like the Jewishness of the story. Makes me feel very much at home.
It is extremely Jewish.
It's very extremely Jewish. And, I've had a differing relationship with my own Judaism over the course of my life, and I'm feeling more positively about it lately. And so to see this story on screen, I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed some of the parallels that I saw to my own family, and just to the modus operandi of people that I've known in my life. That out of the way, I like the movie. I don't really have strong emotions about it. I enjoyed it. I like the family. I like the performances. I like the story. I've heard the hit on this movie, or one of the hits on this movie being that like none of us would be interested if it weren't Spielberg's story.
Yes, I believe you heard that from me.
And I disagree with that. I think it is an interesting story being told. It's not just that this kid ends up as Steven Spielberg. The story would be interesting even if the kid ended up as an accountant.
That would be depressing.
That would be depressing, yes.
If this kid whose entire worldview and way of expressing himself is through film, and then he ends up as an accountant, that would be a bummer.
Listen,
if
man,
the movie
it happens
ends the
to
way
people.
It ends, and there's a postscript that's like, Sammy Fabelman grew up to be an accountant, and everything was sad and boring for the rest of his life. Jesus.
Most people experience shit like that, man. My grandfather was an artist, and he was a clerk at a local VA office for his whole life. It's a lived experience for people. It happens.
I'm not diminishing the experience. I'm just saying it would not be the same if
it's a
you
bummer.
grew up to
it's
be
a big bummer.
An accountant.
What I'm saying is that the story itself is interesting, regardless of who it's about. It's interesting to see a child who is this enamored with an art form navigate his way through a traditional family that struggles with accepting an artist. That's a relatable story for a lot of people. And I think it's an interesting one to tell. All of that being said, there's a lot of the Spielberg magic going on. He makes himself known behind the camera. And that's fun to watch. But I don't know that this one will live on in my memory particularly well. It didn't quite strike a chord.
So I was a little ambivalent about it when I first saw it. There are scenes and sequences in it that I love. I genuinely love that Gabriel LaBelle performance as Sammy Fabelman. I think he's really terrific, and there are incredibly great and funny, for as much of a bummer as the movie can kind of be, it's extremely funny. But there's wonderful scenes and sequences to it, and yet my overall response when I walked away was like, boy, I really don't like that Michelle Williams performance. And I think that as you're saying, the take, which was my take, is that I just didn't find the story all that compelling as anything other. If you take the meta narrative out of it, out of knowing that this is Steven Spielberg all but telling his own origin with the camera and the incredibly pivotal spoilers for this movie and also for all the Steven Spielberg movies, but him grappling with his parents' divorce, which is so important in many, many, many of his films. Without that meta narrative, I didn't find the story that compelling. So in advance of this episode, I went and caught it again in theaters because it was re-released. And what kind of got me the second time is how Spielbergy it is, and not just his innate visual language, but how many references there seem to be to other Spielberg films all throughout it. And I don't know that if he is intentionally putting those references in, or if by telling this particular story about his adolescence and growing up in Western American suburbs and the story of relationships with his mother and his father and their parting. If just in telling that story, he's revealing where a lot of these visual motifs in his films came up, or if it's just his innate, very Spielbergy cinematic language that he is unconsciously evoking imagery from E.T. and Raiders of the Lost Ark and AI and a ton of other like seminal films that he's made. And so I still feel like if it wasn't the Steven Spielberg story, I wouldn't find it all that compelling. But because it is the Steven Spielberg story, I find it fascinating. On the Fighting in the War Room podcast that I've mentioned before, I forget which of the hosts. It was either David Ehrlich or Katie Rich. One of them said that Spielberg, as like not just a master artist, but as like someone who is very aware of his own place in pop culture, that Spielberg has to know how impactful his parents' divorce has been on generations of Americans who have grown up on his movies. And so him telling that story in full for the first time and showing you where the marital tensions in Close Encounters of the Third Kind or in Jurassic Park or in the fucking like Hook or, you know, countless others, the parental difference or the parental distance between like David and his mother in AI, like all of this has roots in Spielberg's parents' divorce. And so by him telling that story, he is recontextualizing his entire body of work, and he is recontextualizing the most significant divorce in the second half of the 20th century in terms of like cultural impact. And it's true. Yeah. It's true. So I find all of that stuff fascinating, and I liked it a lot more the second time. I thought it landed much better. And it feels weirdly disjointed to me. Like, for as much as I love that final scene which according to Spielberg is verbatim what actually happened when he really met the real John Ford. The final scene where David Lynch plays John Ford. I love that scene. I think it's a riot and the performances are wonderful and it is a pitch perfect scene. And I don't actually know what it has to do with the movie that I just spent 2.5 hours watching. It's autobiographical with Tony Kushner and with all these collaborators. He is telling his own story. And there's a lot of it that feel like he's too close to the story to maybe know whether or not something is good for the overall narrative. I mean, from his own account and from multiple actors who have been interviewed about the film, he cried on set basically every day. That it was like that emotional for him to like finally come out and tell this story. And, David Sims, who we both love from the Blank Check podcast and who's the critic at large for The Atlantic, his initial response to the movie, I think when he saw it at Toronto, was it's like watching your dad cry. And like, I feel very much like that, like as a movie Dorcas who came up in the 80s and 90s, like Steven Spielberg has always been like kind of a father figure in a way to me, and his movies have kind of helped shape my worldview. So I find it very compelling and fascinating that way.
I very much enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't know that this is going to have like lasting impact on me. But there is a lot of stuff that I can relate to. And it's funny that you mentioned not loving the Michelle Williams performance. I really love the Michelle Williams performance. I think
I'm on an island out here. Everybody fucking loves that Michelle Williams performance.
I think she hits it. I think she hits it hard. I think the choices that are made are done with thought. And it's a big performance for sure, but I don't know. I mentioned my grandfather earlier, because that's a big touchstone for me in thinking about how people behave, and in particular how artists behave. The story of Max Lerner for me is the story of a boy and then a man who was very creative and had all of his creativity stomped out of him, and turned towards anger and resentment. And only like came towards reconciliation very, very, very late in his life. such that he didn't actually get reconciliation with his kids. He had just like started the process. And I see Michelle Williams as a similar figure, except that she's able to assert herself in a way that Max never did. She sees in her son this creativity and wants to foster it and make sure that he is able to continue to express himself almost because she never was. It's this counterpart. It's this counterpoint to the story of Max, who saw my mother's creativity and wanted to stomp it out because he was never able to express his own.
Yeah.
And I thought that her performance was really convincing in that. I thought, it's the idea of being in the Jewish culture of the first half of the 20th century, which is like, you have to, if you're a woman, make babies. If you're a man, create a solid foundation for your family and make and save money. And that's how Paul Dano, enters the world. His whole thing is like creating something for his family. And Michelle Williams has obviously been indoctrinated that way, but it doesn't resonate with her. And as her son becomes something more creative, her own need to express herself sort of blossoms. And I think she does a good job of showing that.
Yeah, it's a very mannered performance. It's very affected. It's not naturalistic at all. And I don't come to Spielberg films for naturalistic performances. Like, that's not usually his way. His movies are usually heightened to some degree or another. But I found her that affected, that like mannered performance as Mitzi, to be just a little bit too much for me. And like, I had just not that long ago finally watched Fosse Verdon, the FX miniseries about Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, where she plays Gwen Verdon, the dancer, and Fosse's wife and then ex-wife. And the performances are very similar. And in interviews, Spielberg has said that he cast her in large part based on this kind of like revelatory performance to him of her as Gwen Verdon. And I don't know, Gwen Verdon is like, she's a performer and she's on Broadway and she's a dancer and an actress. And all of that makes sense to me with a performance that mannered. And I know that Mitzi is a performer in her own right as a pianist, but there was just something about that performance that really stuck out to me in contrast to all the rest of the performances in the movie. Like, I think Paul Dano does wonderful work, but he underplays it. And he's very naturalistic and grounded. And I think all the kids are very grounded and relatable.
I don't necessarily agree with that. He's kind of the heightened version of the mid-century Jewish dad for me.
But
like, explaining everything.
But he's not heightened, though. Like,
he's maybe not heightened, but he's something just south of a caricature. He's maybe not, caricature is not the right word for it. Stereotype.
Okay.
Constantly explaining and like on the verge of condescending, but with a genuine want to like explain the world to people.
But are you talking about the performance or the writing?
I am talking about the performance. I don't think that he's naturalistic about it. He's very like, his face is out there and he like making intense eye contact. And I don't know, it feels like not particularly naturalistic to me. I guess that's not how people behave.
Maybe it's just compared to her then, but compared to her, he feels like he's a documentary subject.
Sure.
And not to say that people can't be larger than life in that way, but there is just something about that performance that I found very off-putting. I also find it very emotionally effective. Like the scene when they're on the way to move out to California and she has to like get out of the car and run up the hill and take a breather, and Sammy comes up and they kind of talk and they try and like deal with some of the shit that's come up in some pretty pivotal scenes prior to that. I think she's wonderful in that. I think there's a lot of scenes where I like the performance, but overall I just found it very distancing. And I'm normally somebody who loves Michelle Williams, and this one just did not do it for me.
Yeah, it hit it for me. I fucking love Judd Hirsch's scene.
His one scene
is so good.
Incredible.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
His run away and join the circus scene,
art and family, they'll tear you apart. Fantastic. Judd Hirsch. I love that. And I don't know, the stuff that really gets me again is the meta text, is the Spielberg, the filmmaker talking to the audience. Like, to get a little bit into spoiler territory, but like late in the film, as they're having like a pretty intense family meeting, and there's this brief moment as the daughters are crying and the parents are like arguing and trying to explain something big and profound to the kids, and we cut to Sammy watching all of it, and then looks up and sees his own reflection in the mirror, and he's imagining himself with his little like 8mm camera recording all of it, because he can't help but see things through a lens, or want to see things through a lens. And it's the whole movie kind of like weirdly complicates all of Spielberg's films, because and I didn't catch this as much the first time, but watching it a second time and kind of like knowing the arc of it, knowing what I should be paying attention to, like, he is very conflicted about being a filmmaker. He's not just conflicted about the things that he filmed like on like family camping trips and shit as a kid, but he's conflicted about how as a director he has to be manipulative of his actors, and how, because to him, and like the movie conveys this pretty effectively, that like he just innately, there is something about him where he innately knows how to communicate to an audience in cinema language, in shot compositions, and in editing rhythms, and in the construction of a sequence. Like, he can make things that are very evocative, right? Like his first big filmmaking experience is when he uses dad's camera to recreate this traumatic crane crash sequence from The Greatest Show on Earth, his like first movie that he ever saw. And he shows it to his mom, to Mitzi, and she's like, "Oh, you're 5 and you're already good at this. Like, this is why I need to encourage your art." Like, but he doesn't always understand it, and he can't always articulate why he's able to create these images that are so moving and upsetting to people. And you think about like his whole war film that he makes, From Here to Nowhere, or Trip to Nowhere, which is the actual name of a war movie that Spielberg made when he was a teenager. And the way that it's shot and staged is exactly the same way that they shot Saving Private Ryan, which is they had a script and they dressed the beach in Ireland where they filmed it, and they knew what the beats they had to hit were, but he couldn't storyboard, and they just filmed it like one beat at a time, which is exactly the same way that Sammy Fabelman shoots his war film. And then he goes up and he gets in that one actor's ear, and he infects that actor with his own guilt about something that he had done to the family with his camera, and something he had revealed to them. And it's a confessional from Spielberg. He's confessing to the audience, like, I have this power. I don't always use it the best way. I don't always know what's going to happen with it, but I know that I hurt people with it sometimes, and I'm not in control of the results, and I'm afraid that I'm a manipulator. And like, it's fascinating. Like, I want to go back and rewatch all of his movies in the context of the Fabelmans, and just like see where it's all coming from.
Right.
Yeah. So again, like it's a knock, and it's like, it's a bug, and it's a feature that I feel like the movie would not be as successful if we didn't know it was Steven Spielberg telling his life story. But I also think the fact that it is him telling his life story is the most interesting thing about the movie. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Like, the narrative I don't find as compelling, but the meta narrative I find absolutely enthralling.
Even as someone who, I'm not the movie guy on this podcast, nor am I necessarily a movie guy in real life, though certainly more than other people are.
People who saw Avatar in 2D and only 24 frames a second.
Steven Spielberg has been certainly far and away the most influential filmmaker in my life. His movie, when someone asks me what my favorite movies are, the ones that immediately come to mind are Jurassic Park and Jaws. And then Minority Report is usually the next one.
I fucking love Minority Report. And so many people think of that as minor Spielberg, and that
it's bullshit. It's
that movie
horseshit. That movie rules.
Rips. I think it's in my Spielberg top 5, if not my top 5, then my top 10. Love Minority Report.
It's so fucking good, and it's like it's one of those movies that I will watch again at any moment. I really struggled. I had over my friend. We can say friend of the pod, JP.
JP, he is a friend of the pod for sure. Love that guy.
And his partner Savannah came over, and we were like eating pizza and drinking, and they wanted to watch a movie, and so I put on Minority Report, and I'm like enthralled, and it's like my 15th time watching the movie or whatever.
Yeah,
I've seen it a cajillion times, and I'm still every single time just in it. And turn the TV off. Lights come back up, and Savannah's like, I didn't really like it. And I was like, you have to leave my house right now.
Oh, no. I mean, there's people out there, they don't like Minority Report.
Her big knock against it was that it was too blue. And I'm like, I don't know.
It does have an extreme aesthetic.
It does.
It is very extreme. It's very blue. It's very high contrast. The grain is out of control. But I
love it for that. I love it for that
movie. I need a 4K of that movie. I need a 4K, Jamie. Where's my Minority Report 4K?
I don't know. I am not in control of the conversions to 4K that exist.
I know you're not.
If I was, 4K or Minority Report would be at the top of the list. Anyway, this was a very long walk and then diversion to the point that I'm trying to make, which is Steven Spielberg is influential and important in my life. However, I found the narrative of The Fabelmans to be compelling without the meta text of knowing that it is Spielberg. It resonates with me on probably specifically the like culturally Jewishness of it all.
Yeah.
And I really liked it, but like I said, will it stick with me in the next decade? I don't know. Probably not.
There are scenes that are like unforgettable to me. Just the opening scene, I started talking to myself the first time I saw it in theaters, because the opening scene is like there's a bunch of people standing in line outside a big like movie palace, and we track down this long line of people, and then we come in using the visual language of E.T., where the camera is at the child's eye level, and we close in on a close-up of little Sammy Fabelman, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and his dad crouches down to get into frame, and his dad is trying to explain to him how movies work, and he's trying to explain like the mechanical nature of it and the persistence of vision. And then we pan over, and his mom comes into frame, and she's like, it's a dream. Movies are dreams. And the two of them are going back and forth. And I just remember laughing to myself in the theater, like, my God, Steve, you're 90 seconds into the movie and you have somebody explaining persistence of vision. Like, Jesus Christ. But then the kid goes and sees the movie, and he's absolutely traumatized by it. And then the whole like first act of the film is him trying to like come to grips with his trauma. Like that, he did that to me. Like, I was traumatized by Jurassic Park. And then it was, I think I've talked about it on the show before. It was my mom taking me a second time and convincing me like, but you're not going to get scared. And if you do, you can just remind yourself that you know what's going to happen and it's totally safe, and like trying to contextualize that terror.
For me, that scene is the Judd Hirsch scene.
The Judd Hirsch scene is
the
phenomenal.
Art and Family will tear you apart. Like that scene will stick with me forever. Partly because the message resonates with me.
Yeah.
But also that the performance and the dramatic up angle on Judd Hirsch looking terrifying.
Really shredded too, man.
Yep.
Judd Hirsch is keeping it tight. Good for you, Judd Hirsch. In his 80s and has more muscle definition than either one of us.
Yep.
God bless you, Judd Hirsch. Well, yeah. All right. So the Fabelmans. People should watch the Fabelmans. It may still be in theaters by the time this episode comes out. If not, you should rent it. You should stream it. You should buy it. I'm waiting for the prices to come down, and then I'm going to buy that 4K. And people should check it out, because who knows? Maybe Steven will win his 3rd Best Director Oscar. Jamie.
Yes.
Most importantly to this discussion.
Yes.
Do you think this wine that you chose, without any attempt at making a pairing, pairs with any of these 3 family-oriented motion pictures? And why?
It's a bubbly wine. It's easy to drink when you're watching kind of anything. I don't know that this wine specifically, if it pairs best with one, it's probably Everything Everywhere.
Wrong.
Sure.
Wrong.
What do you think?
It's the Fabelmans.
You think it's the Fabelmans?
It's the Fabelmans. Yeah, because it's bittersweet.
Mm.
The Fabelmans is bitter. It's not bitter, but it's not sweet. This was something that my wife and I were trying to we were talking about after we saw it, which is that like I feel that there is a tonal dissonance at the heart of the Fabelmans, which is between the very direct and sincere and emotional visual language of Steven Spielberg, which he's often been accused of being saccharine or simplified or manipulative, but that very direct emotional language, which we equate with like a sweetness and a warmth and with family and with love and with comfort, that I find in contrast with the very not cynical but like complex thematic stuff that's going on in the movie. Like the shit that's happening in the family is complicated. Sammy's relationship to his mom is complicated. Sam's relationship to his beloved art form cinema is extremely fucking complicated. And that for me, if this wine were to line up with any of them, it would be that. It would be that I think I'm going to see, and I feel like maybe while I'm watching it, that I'm watching a sweet and lovely and bubbly, Steven Spielberg movie, like an old school, like Hollywood classicist. But then I've got something that's got bitterness and it's got sourness and it's got acid and there's no sweetness whatsoever. And it's surprising me at every turn.
Yeah, for me, it's I don't find this wine to be particularly bitter, but it's got great acid, it's got bubbles, it's got texture, and Everything Everywhere is kind of frenetic and kinetic and movement oriented. And I think that while sipping this wine, I think that those two things would line up quite well.
You think this is kinetic? This wine?
Mm-hmm.
You think there's a kineticism?
Kineticness? Kinetitude?
I don't think any of these are words, but
kinesque.
No, that's even worse.
Yeah.
And is that the bubbles that's giving it a kinetic quality?
Mm-hmm. And the really high acid, and the way the flavor moves. You've got this like big fruity character, and then you sort of finish in like mineral territory. Yeah, that's the way this wine makes me feel. Although there is the argument to be made as you were describing it, and as I'm looking at the image in your background of Sammy Fabelman watching a movie on his hands, that like warmth. I associate that kind of like that warmth with this like cider, this like fall time comfort kind of note in this wine. So, taste is subjective. Scott and I, as always, are disagreeing about these things.
Well, it's true. And even if our agreement about the Fabelmans, we still manage to find a way to disagree.
It's true. We've got 2 more Best Picture nominations episodes coming at you.
That's right. There's still more to go, everybody. There's 10 nominees this year, and we've only talked about 4 of them.
So next time we've got more bubbly wine. We're pulling out rosé this time. Rosé from Portugal. This is Filipa Pato's 3B Rosé Cuvée from Bairrada. 3B named for the 2 grapes that go into it, Baga and Bicol, and it is from Bairrada, 3 Bs. Although I would argue there's a 4th B because it is Brut.
Is this like an RRR thing?
Not really, no. But it
RRR
is available.
Not nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Some people are very upset about that.
I'm sure that they are vocal about it.
Well, they'll get over it because, as the great Bong Joon-ho said, the Academy Awards are merely a local awards show.
Nailed it. Fucking
boom.
Nailed it.
Tell him, Bong.
So, where was I?
3Bs.
Oh, yes, 3B. Filippo Pato 3B Rosé, available at chamberstreetwines.com for $18.99 plus tax and shipping.
Oh, I love that. $18.99.
Scotty's going to hate the one after that, though.
How much is that one?
$34.99.
Does it have chunkus?
No chunkus.
Well, all right, at least there's that. But since I've already paid for it, I guess it's too late for me to hate it. Well, to go along with 3Bs, we've got 3 movies and we're going to war. We're going to war. 3 movies that are all to varying degrees about war and the effect of war on the human soul, or not at all. So we've got All Quiet on the Western Front from German director Edward Berger, available on your Netflix for your viewing pleasure or viewing something else. There's also The Banshees of Inisherin from writer-director Martin McDonagh. That is on the HBO Max and available on your VODs wherever you get them. And of course, Top Gun Maverick on Paramount Plus and on VOD. But I might argue that if you have not seen Top Gun Maverick in a big IMAX theater,
that you haven't seen it at all, Scott?
Have you truly seen it?
Jesus Christ.
Because if you're just in it for the narrative and the plot and the literary qualities that Jamie
sorely
wants,
disappointed.
I mean, it still works. It did get an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay.
That is insane.
You know what? I kind of like that nomination.
It's a bad one. We'll talk about it next time.
It's not a bad one. We'll talk about it in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please follow us on the socials at Bigger Bottle Pod. Email us with questions, comments, concerns at biggerbottlepod@gmail.com. Make sure you rate, review, and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a listener outside the United States, please email us your review from Apple Podcasts, because those bastards don't only show us domestic reviews.
Wow, that's messed up. Why would you call them that, Jamie? They shape our fates and our future.
Yeah, that's the problem.
This episode was produced and edited by Scott Hudson. That's me. And our social media presence is thanks to Jamie Harrison Rubin III. That's him.
Me.
Our art is by Ross Connor. Thank you very much, Ross. And also thanks to Rebecca McCracken joining the team for helping out with project management and operations.
Remember, everyone, drink more wine, watch more movies. It's good for you. We promise.